This is the Red Podcast.
This is episode number 137. Got somebody who's not working out? We're going to talk to you about how to fire them. That's coming up.
This is the Red Podcast. Real entrepreneur development. Make more money, work less, and live a life of freedom. No BS advice that really works. Here's your hosts, David Hooper and Laurel Staples.
My friend is a marriage coach, and she had a prospect call her up the other day after seeing her website. And it was a guy that called her up and said, can you help me and my wife with our marriage? And she said, yeah, obviously that's what I do. What's the problem you're going through? And he said, well, I've cheated on my wife 8 times now. And so my friend pauses and she tells the guy, she's like, look, we don't work with people like that. Come back if one of you ever is having trouble loading the dishwasher or making up the bed or working with the kid or something like that. But it's good to know who your target market is and who your target market is not in this case.
There's some things you just can't help people with.
No, she's not a therapist. She's a relationship or marriage coach. That would be getting in a little too deep.
Well, what is cheating? Do you think the guy maybe looked at a woman, found her attractive, and felt guilty about that? He done that 7 or 8 times?
Sounded like he had more of a sex addiction. Not something that she would want to deal with, but it's good to know who your client is and who your client is not. So what would have happened if she went forward with that guy? She probably would have been miserable working with him. But good for him to make that phone call.
The topic today, slightly related, how to fire people, sometimes before you've ever hired them, apparently. RED stands for Real Entrepreneur Development. This is the podcast for authors, speakers, and coaches who help you expand your influence, reach more people with your message, and make money doing work that you love. We show you how to build a successful personality-based business and live life on your terms. That's tough to do when you need money and somebody's coming to you and they've got money, just to say, hey, you're not for me.
It is hard to do, and I think that's why it makes such a good story, because there are things she could have done to help this guy, maybe, and he's ready to give her money, and he's eager to work with her. It's money on the table, and she's saying, sorry, not what I do, which I think opens up space for the ideal client, the perfect client. And that's same if you have a speaking gig that you turn down that's not right for you, or other opportunities, an interview or something like that. It's not a perfect fit, turn it down. Open yourself up to something that is a perfect fit for you. It makes your life a whole lot better.
It's also the same for employees, contractors, freelancers. So let's get into that discussion. Curious to know, Laurel, how many people have you hired whom you'd hire again? Do you have a good record for hiring good people?
Most of the hiring that I was doing was when I ran my retail store. And I would say that I don't know if I'd hire many of those people again. Some of them were okay, but at the point I am now, the level I'm at, I would not consider those people. What about you, David? Anyone you hired that you would hire again?
A couple people, although I can't think of anybody that I would put in the exact same position that I had them in. And part of that is just my own development. Part of that is where my company is now compared to where it was. Taking time, thinking about what's happening with certain situations that you've been in. I think we'd all approach things differently most of the time.
Oh, yeah.
What does it take for you, Laurel Staples, to fire somebody?
Oh, I'm terrible at firing people. I want everyone to be happy and to like me and all those good things that Southern women like. And firing people, that was tough for me. I fired an intern once. She was working at my retail store, and she was getting credit from one of the local universities to come and intern with me for a class she was taking. I think it was in marketing. She was awful, and I tried to be really clear about expectations and what she should do and giving her projects and trying to tell her what to do, but not micromanage her. I was really trying at that point, but she didn't do anything. And I eventually had to call the school in this case and say, look, I don't know how to work with her. And it was pretty painful. She looked really blindsided.
So second chance, third chance, fourth chance with this lady.
No.
Okay, so you're pretty good. You're pretty quick to fire people then.
Yeah, well, I tried with her. I tried to get her going. And in retrospect, I probably could have done a better job communicating because obviously she was totally clueless and I was still working on my management skills at the time, but it was bad. So I kind of went around her back and had to call the school and fire her that way. And she had to go find another way to get credit. But that's kind of how it was. What about you?
I've given a lot of people second chances, third chance, fourth chance. I'm very, very tolerant of things because I was such a bad employee. But what I've found is that's not good for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good for them because you're never going to be happy. Think about the guy that you mentioned who's been cheated on his wife 8 times. She's probably not going to be happy. She's probably always going to have that suspicion that he's going to mess things up. Same thing with an employee who's messed things up. I think that once you've gone there, it takes a lot to get that confidence in somebody back.
We've been watching a lot of Undercover Boss recently, and we watched an episode where this employee, he was probably a teenager, early 20s, was just really disgruntled with working in the store, and the CEO was undercover there working with him, and the CEO ended up giving him a second chance at the end of the show, and the show claimed that he was doing better in his environment and all that. So sometimes a second chance can be good in a way that it helps the employee refocus and see the good in what they're doing, but in the end, it's probably just not a good fit for them, and you need to support them to move on to something else. I mean, how many times have you gotten fired, David, where it was like the best thing that ever happened to you?
Every time.
Every time.
And that's something else that we need to discuss. It's that problems start beforehand. I know with me, I've been desperate to hire people because I've got an event coming up and I need somebody to manage that event or do promotion for that event. So I've got this time deadline that kind of speeds up my hiring decision when I actually would have been better off not hiring somebody. It's not paying attention to red flags, not being clear about expectations, and not documenting those expectations and when things are going wrong. I was eating lunch at a Qdoba, which is sort of like a Chipotle, such as owned by Jack in the Box. It was interesting because there was the boss next to me talking to an employee also next to me. So I'm there eating and I'm listening in on their conversation. And this guy had been late, wasn't showing up. And I've never really experienced that, not having worked a lot in corporate America where they give you the verbal warning, then a written warning, then another written warning, and then you're fired. And it was interesting to me how she documented everything. She'd given him a verbal warning that had been written down. She was giving him a written warning, which she handed to him and made him sign. And she was very, very clear. Obviously, Qdoba, a Chipotle, McDonald's, Jack in the Box, when you've got a big organization, that's how they're doing things. And I think that's something that entrepreneurs can learn from, is being very clear, not only about expectations, but also documenting when problems arise. That's how you know, not just from a legal standpoint, but mentally and emotionally, that it's okay to fire somebody. Because it is tough.
Also knowing that everyone's on the same page. And that's something, as an employer, it was almost like a juvenile relationship for me. Like, you know what you did. You know that you came to work at the wrong time. And a lot of times employees, they just don't know what you're thinking because they're not you. It's like any relationship. They can't read your mind. So documenting it, communicating to them, writing it down, making them sign it so that everyone is on the same page about what the expectations are and the fact that the employee is not meeting them. Because every employer wants something different. And if no one can read your mind, how do you get that across? I think you need to train them well first so you don't run into these issues. But if you are having a problem with an employee, make that happen, make that communication happen so everyone knows what's going on.
Clarity with employees, not just in the firing process, but in the day-to-day, what do I expect from you process, has always been an issue for me. And it's not just employees, it's also freelancers, guys that I'll hire for a one-off project like a graphic designer. You've got to tell people exactly what you expect and what you want them to do. Sometimes dumbing it down to what I call a third grade level. It's got to be very, very specific. You can't expect people to read your mind.
What I would do is if I had to go back and do it again, especially with the retail stores, I would probably hire people on for like a trial period and say, hey, we're going to try this for 3 months. If it's not a good fit for me or if it's not a good fit for you, no hard feelings. But I think when you're new to the hiring process, it's just hard to know what to look for. If it's not working out, it's hard to know how to communicate that to them. So I think having small intervals where everyone can test it out is a good thing to do, which that would have helped me a lot in the past.
That works with freelancers as well. For example, if you're looking for a book cover, if you're looking for some brochures or something fairly complex, you can start with something really simple, such as a logo. Logo is not always that simple, but my point being is that it's a very clear job. You just need the files in one certain way. They don't necessarily have to be printed up. It's a lot easier from a structure of here's what I need and here's what I want it to look like than something like a brochure that's a lot more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say your logo is not important and that it's okay to get a beginner, basic, first-time designer on that. It is not. Sometimes a logo is more important than the brochure, but how you run the process is a lot more simple in my opinion.
It's all about learning about yourself, how you work, how you communicate, and making that effective for the employer-employee relationship. What happens if you've communicated with your employee, you've written them up, and you've just gotten to the point where you got to let them go? What would you do first? Because that's a scary process for a lot of people.
I've got some ways that I approach things. It's based on how I like to be approached, and that is always face-to-face. It's like breaking up with a girlfriend, breaking up with a boyfriend. Always do that face-to-face.
You can't text them?
You don't do it via text message.
Oh.
That's your problem.
What about Facebook?
Can't do it via Facebook. Don't do it publicly via Facebook especially. Don't do it via a conference call. I've heard of stories where that's been done. The whole company calls in. Oh, by the way, Bob, you're fired. John, you're fired. Report to HR. We'll escort you out of the building. Some kind of message like that. That's awful.
Oh, yeah.
Awful. Always face-to-face.
And don't do it when you're upset about something. If you decide that you want to let them go, great. But take a pause and have a meeting with them at a time where you're not upset about something that they're doing.
You know how I got fired from my first real job? My first real job being an ice cream store where I was scooping ice cream for $3.35 an hour.
Because you were being your lovely self?
Yep, I was being my lovely self, and I deserved to get fired. But you know how it happened?
How?
I showed up, and I wasn't on the schedule. That is how she did things. Everybody knew it when you weren't on the schedule, when your name tag wasn't in the name tag bucket or wherever we kept those. She's pretending you didn't exist, mailed you your final check, and that was it. I was going to accept that. I was like, all right, fine, I don't want to be here anyway. My parents got pissed. And they said, I think you need to sit down with David and let him know why you fired him. It's a good opportunity for him to learn something. And I don't think she ever met with me. I don't remember that, but she told my father because he was very concerned about this practice. Little did he know it was going to happen about 25 times.
He had to get
that.
ready for this.
She was just breaking him in. But she had complaints, whatever. She told him. And I guess you could say it's a learning experience. I don't know. But you have to wonder if you could even trust somebody who's going to handle something that way. And I think that's the big picture here, is that you need to do face-to-face firings because you still want to be a trustworthy person. Maybe it's something you could salvage. Not to say that you're going to work for somebody or have somebody work for you, but all is not lost when you no longer are working for somebody. I've had this happen a lot. Like I said, about 25, 26 firings. A lot of times it's done via phone. Yeah, just don't show up. You're fired. Not the way I like to do it, but at the same time, I can't say I was emotionally scarred. I didn't have to drive in and drive right back home.
Let me ask you this, though. Did you feel like in those instances where you got fired that your bosses were communicating to you what was expected? And did you get a clear understanding that you were not meeting those expectations? Or did you feel just blindsided?
I've never felt blindsided because I'm not an idiot and I know what's going on. I knew that it wasn't a match and I was looking for relief. I was wanting to go. and I was wanting better things, but I didn't know how to go about it, or I was too comfortable and too scared to take that jump and just say, hey, I quit. The same reason that they didn't want to fire me face-to-face, I didn't want to say, hey, I quit face-to-face. So in the end, it's been a good thing for me, because when you are letting somebody go, you're letting them go. You're letting them find better opportunities. It's like a relationship that you don't want to be in. Let them go. Let them go find something better.
Set them free.
Set them free.
So if always doing the firing face-to-face is the first thing you'd want to do, I'd say the next thing to keep in mind would be to be upfront about why you're letting them go, which is not what your ice cream boss did for you, but it's going to be helpful to be truthful. Don't blame it on something. Don't make excuses. Just tell them the way it is.
You want to be nice, but you don't want to be too nice. You want to be firm. Don't try to be a friend or let them cry on your shoulder. Let them know everything is going to be okay. This is the way that it is. This is the way that it's going to be. I'm not changing my mind. Don't say it's about the money if it's not about the money. People aren't idiots. If you hire somebody else the next week, they're going to know that it's not about the money. Don't give people false hopes. Don't give people a false sense of maybe they were doing better work than they actually were.
It's not me, it's you.
Yeah, we all know that. It is you.
It is you.
It's always you. You know, in Toastmasters, we've got this thing. It's called CRE, which is commendation, recommendation, and encouragement. And I think that that is a good way, if you can do that within this framework of being upfront, nice but not too nice. Let people know that you believe in them. That's the commendation. But not the work that they're doing. That's the recommendation. You didn't really handle yourself well. This isn't a match for you. And also encouragement. Hey, this isn't a good match for you, but this gives you an opportunity to go find something that is.
Again, I think being fired for a lot of people can be the best thing that ever happened. And if you can handle it as the employer in a mature, direct, truthful way that sends them on their way to the next thing, even if they can't see that it's an opportunity right in front of them at that moment, still to do it in a way that's firm but friendly and opens them up to the next thing. Because there's no reason for anyone to be in a situation or environment where they're not thriving and they're not reaching their full potential. It's not fair to you and it's not fair to them.
Have you ever been fired, Laurel?
No. I'm sorry. I have not.
You're too good.
I probably should have been fired at times. Absolutely. But have you seen this face? Nobody's going to fire this face.
Well, I'm just curious if you had been fired, if it was a bad thing. I can't think of anybody that's ever been fired that didn't later admit that it was a very, very good thing.
I've been broken up with.
Okay, similar.
Yes.
That's being fired from a relationship.
I have been fired from a relationship, and I got the whole, like, it's not you, it's me speech, and then the guy's dating someone in a week. And
yeah, because that's
like,
BS.
It's total BS. I'm like, just tell me the way it is. And it ends up being the best thing that ever happened to both people in the relationship. But just tell me the way it is. I'm not a baby.
So always face-to-face, never via text, conference call, Facebook. Be upfront. And finally, to reiterate this, do keep it positive. That doesn't mean that you have to let somebody cry on your shoulder and you can't be very direct, but keep it positive. Focus on the good. Everybody gets to move on. Everybody gets an opportunity to find a better match.
Also, keep in mind that you are not responsible for their reaction. They are entitled to their reaction, whether it's positive, whether it's crying, whether it's yelling at you. They are entitled to that. You just have to do the best job you can do on your end. You don't have to help them find another job. You don't have to point them in the right direction. You just have to be that friendly and firm and let them process it how they choose to process it. You're not responsible for that.
Final thought, do it now. Do it now. Episode number 133, which is at redpodcast.com/133. We talked about this, how most people were too quick to hire, but slow to fire. And think about the very beginning of this episode. This guy has cheated on a woman 8 times. He should have been fired long ago. Maybe second or third time, let's say. She wouldn't have had to go through that. Same thing with your employees. There's a better opportunity for everybody when you fire more quickly. So do it face-to-face, be upfront, truthful, keep it positive, but do it now. If you have questions or comments, reach out to us. redpodcast.com is where to find me, where to find Laurel online. You'll also find past episodes. You can also give us episode suggestions if you'd like for something to be covered in the future. We've got an app, Laurel, Google Play, Amazon App Store. If you've got an Android, you can go to iTunes to get the iPhone version. Just search for Real Entrepreneur Development. You will see it there. It's free and the easiest way to get Red Podcast delivered to your phone or mobile device. And while you're on iTunes, subscribe. That helps us to come up more frequently in the iTunes search engine. When you do that, more people find us, and we build a bigger Real Entrepreneur community. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Red Podcast, Real Entrepreneur Development. Subscribe today using iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.
But they're not good at like the hardcore drug stuff. Sometimes there's a wrench in the spokes, just kills what you're trying to do. You're looking at me like, what the are you talking about?
Yeah, we need
Okay.
something.
All right. Something a little lighter?
Yeah.
Okay. It's like breaking up with a girlfriend. Girlfriend, what?
What?
It's like baking.
Like baking a cake.